I grew up in theater. My dad, my stepdad, was an excellent guitarist. He's actually in the Upper Midwest Music Hall of Fame for his guitar skills. And one of my earliest memories of being with my dad was basically being a roadie for him, bringing in his amps, his guitars, and everything like that. Being a bigger kid, I think he found free labor really enticing. So early on, I was setting up chords and setting up sort of like his system as he would go play his various gigs around the Twin Cities. And it was kind of like the introduction into all kinds of things theater. It might surprise you, or it might not, that I've spent some time on stage, with the one under the spotlight. But for me, I actually prefer being behind the stage, being the techie. I actually spent several years at the Mall of America working in their sound and light division at the Mall of America's Camp Snoopy at that time, and I just loved it, setting up stuff, doing sound and light design, and in a lot of ways I think it's given me an appreciation for how things are presented. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever received came from one of my supervisors when I was a sound and light technician. We were designing a show for the Halloween Spooktacular that was happening at Camp Snoopy. And I was in charge of sort of doing some of the special lighting effects. And at a certain point, it was ready to show him my first draft. And he was like, "Oh, this is great. Absolutely excellent, wonderful," and all the kinds of, the correct flashing and the colors and all that jazz. And then I kept working on it. And this was the piece of advice he gave me. He says, "RJ, it takes two people to do art. One to do art and one to tell you when you're done." And the thing is, that's incredibly true. Some of those lighting skills have actually translated into some of the early days when we were recording masses in the pandemic. And I remember, the very first mass, I probably spent way too long in our offices trying to sort of get the mass perfect, editing and everything. I had a good friend actually come bring me pizza. And this friend was actually that same kind of person who said, "Yeah, RJ, no, it looks fine. Let's go." Right? To be able to be that person in your life to sort of give you that sense in which, all right, it's good, right? I can be a perfectionist in so many things, and just to have those people that I trust to sort of let me know, all right, no, this is really good. We need to move on. We need to do the next thing. And I think this is the heart of today's gospel. It's sort of presented in the negative. Don't judge others. Right? Don't be that person who sees the splinter in someone else's eye, ignoring your own weaknesses or ignoring your own sort of imperfections. But I think in the positive sense, and this I think is what's kind of continuing the 3-week series we had on discernment, in terms of having those people in our lives who also serve as a wonderful sounding board. I mean, there have been a number of moments in my life where I've been frustrated and I just didn't understand what was going on. And it wasn't until I took, a 15, 20-minute conversation with a good friend whom I trusted to be able to just sort of process what I was feeling, to process what I was thinking, right? To have those moments in which I could sort of lay out the thing that was bothering me and then sort of analyze it, go a little deeper. And often I find that it wasn't the actual moment that was really frustrating to me. It was some assumption I had or something that was a little bit deeper, some other sort of experience that led to that particular feeling. Maybe it was anger or sadness or fear. Whenever that happens, having that person is a wonderful foil, a wonderful mirror in my life to be able to sort of answer when I'm feeling frustrated or when I'm feeling those feelings that are just really hard to get your hands around. And the same is true whenever we make a decision. So often we think of decision-making as being sort of the individual thing. And we began that way, several weeks ago when we talked about the examen and being able to just notice our feelings and to be able to notice where we are at in a particular moment. To take that sort of, the 5 Ps, if you remember, the way of being present before God and patient and presenting what we are feeling before God as we reflect on them. And that's a wonderful starting place, but we cannot end there. And then the second week we talked about this need of, communally discerning, being a community that tries to make a decision. And in either case, whether that is a community as a whole discerning or individually, there is this sense of confirmation. And that comes when people either affirm or challenge our own sense of what we have decided. I may want to be the next running back in the NFL, but if I don't have the certain talent, the certain size, or the ability, the community that is the team of football is going to come back at me and they're going to say, hey man, you should be on the offensive line because you're slow. True words. A coach to me said that in a very loving way. But those moments in which, we're just sort of reoriented to what are our gifts and talents? Even the priesthood is not something that is individually discerned by the person discerning priesthood, right? I might think I'm called to the priesthood, but without that confirmation, both by the Society of Jesus in this case, right? They're affirming me to take vows, they're advancing me in my formation, but the people of God also have a role in affirming or challenging me in my priesthood. And that isn't a challenge that ends after or at ordination, right? Just because one is ordained doesn't mean that the community loses that opportunity to challenge those of us who are ordained. In fact, if I'm going to be a healthy, successful priest, that communication, that challenge, that loving reflection is a necessary component to help me continue to grow in my priesthood. I hope I'm not the same priest that I was ordained as. Right, that as I grow in wisdom and knowledge, or as today's gospel says, as the disciple grows into the teacher, they will be like the teacher, but not necessarily equal with the teacher being Jesus. Right, that I have a place to grow. I have a place in which that constant confirmation. Right? And so since we understand that sense of people being able to affirm or challenge us, I think that really means that anytime we make a decision, the decision portion of it is just the middle part. And then we kind of keep going back to discernment. We keep going back to the decisions that we make, seeking confirmation or challenge. Perhaps there's a way to be modified, a way to sort of grow deeper, a way to sort of collectively as a community help us each achieve the goal that God has in store for us. And, as Ignatius says, the ultimate goal is to praise, reverence, and serve God. All that we do, whether it is, in a married life, or it's in a single life, or it's in, a priestly life, or whatever it happens to be, is to that end. Today's second reading spells that out so beautifully, right? That the cares of the world are nothing when compared to the end for which we are created, right? Death loses its sting because we know that death doesn't have the final answer. The world loses its anxiety to us because we realize that the world isn't where we find our happiness. It is in that communal, collective, and slow work of growing in faith, growing as a community. But those people that we use to reflect, they too have to be discerned. And there are people in my life who at one point had a particular role of sort of affirming or challenging me, and whether that's because I'm no longer in formation or because I've moved away or moved away from that friendship, that they don't have that same role. But I continue to discern who in my life do I trust enough with the vulnerability of saying, hey, am I doing this right? One of my biggest fears, and I hope you all know this, is when Father Warren, ends his time as our pastor, I will lose a wonderful source of a person I trust explicitly with the ability to say, am I doing this right? Now, thanks be to God, he's not going to be too far away, and he's really good with answering his phone or sometimes just pulling out his phone and making a phone call in the middle of 3 other things that he's doing. So I'm sure that I'll still be able to get a hold of him. But that sort of that tactleness, that proximity, that moment of having someone there is an awareness for me that as we discern, we still need to have those people in our community and in this world to be that foil, to be that mirror, to be that sounding board. But I think that's also true for the community of St. Thomas More. We have these commission structures. We have sort of a leadership team, with various people who represent different elements of that leadership team. And as that team continues to turn over in time, we continue to have to be that place for one another, to be a challenge as well as that place of affirmation, that place to continue to cultivate and build leadership, to build the next teachers. And that, my friends, is part of this discernment process. As we begin, the explicit questioning and having sort of the town hall meetings that we're going to have in April, those are an opportunity for us to reflect on who need to be cultivated to be those leaders and those sounding boards, those mirrors in our community so that we can continue to grow. Because the truth is, there are a lot of incredibly talented people here who can offer something to that process. And just about each and every one of you, as I get to know you more and more, have a different skill set that suddenly I'm like, ooh, we could use that. Recently I heard of someone whose job is landscaping, which is fantastic in the sense that we're kind of looking at landscaping as part of our next phase of what we're going to do when the construction completes. Yeah, I got you. Right? Or those other people who have other skill sets and jobs, people like myself who enjoy the technical aspect of being behind the scenes and running the sound and light. I mean, it's those people who have that energy that help make our live streaming possible. So each of us have something to offer in that process. And so if we take today's gospel and sort of turn it from the negative, that is, don't be the one who is judging others, but who is it that we invite into that process of affirmation and challenge? Then the question becomes a wonderful question of discovery. Who do I want to invite into my life, into that place of vulnerability, to help me grow to the end for which I am created? To praise, reverence, and to serve God.